Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Adiba Jaigirdar, and welcome to the Rainbow Romance panel. I'm super excited to be here. First of all, happy Pride Month to everyone. Um, so um, I'm joined today by four amazing authors: Julie Murphy, Kat Sebastian, Casey McQuiston, and Emery Lee. And I'm just super excited to be speaking to all of them. So I would love it if to start off, you could tell us a little bit about each of your books. So Casey, if you wouldn't mind going first.
Yeah, no problem. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having us. I am the author of Red, White, and Royal Blue and One Last Stop, which just came out 2 weeks ago. And they are both queer new adult romantic comedies. The first is about a member of the first family having an affair with a member of the royal family, and the second is a public transit strangers to lovers rom-com with a time travel twist.
Kat?
Sure. I write queer historical romance, and my latest release, The Queer Principles of KITT, is about a bratty aristocrat who needs to hire a highwayman to steal something from his evil dad, and then together they do crime.
Emery?
I am the author of Meet Cute Diary, which I actually have right here, which is a YA trans rom-com about a trans boy who tries to stage the ultimate fake relationship in order to prove his blog's legitimacy after it's threatened by an internet troll.
Judy?
Hi, I'm Julie. I write young adult and middle grade and now adult too. And my most recent book is called Pumpkin. It's the third in my Dumpling trilogy, sort of. Or is it a trilogy? I don't know. Connected Tissue Universe. And it's about Waylon Brewer, who is a fat queer boy in his senior year of high school. In a sort of fit of frustration one night, he makes an audition tape for his favorite drag show and goes to sleep and forgets about it. And then something happens and it goes viral at school. And as sort of a knock on him, he is nominated for prom queen and decides, what the hell, let's do this. And, of course, like falls in love in the process because that's the fun part.
Yeah, so I've read all of these books and they're all like super queer, super adorable, and I love them all. So just to finish off, I'm Adiba Jaigirdar, and my newest release is HANI and ISHU'S Guide to Fake Dating. It's about these two Bengali girls, HANI and ISHU, who decide to fake date. HANI because she wants to validate her bisexuality to her friends, and ISHU because she wants to become head girl and impress her parents. But as their fake relationship turns into something real, they need to figure out if they're willing to make a few sacrifices to get there happily ever after. So to start off, I just want to talk a little bit about the romance genre, because obviously whether we're writing, adult or YA, we're all writing romance and we're all writing queer romance. So what I really love about the romance genre is that it promises a kind of familiarity, but as authors, all of your books actually take this familiarity, but they bring something new to it, right? And you've all kind of made this your own. So can you share a little bit about the challenges and rewards of doing that? So Emery, would you mind going first?
Sure. So I think it's interesting, like just in general, when you start writing a book and you think about like the way that any book you write is inherently going to be in conversation with the books that came before it and the books that come after it. So I think when I first started writing Meet Cute Diary, I knew that I wanted to create like a trans rom-com that followed all of like the rom-com like beats and gave all of those like emotional elements. But at the same time, I also knew that like if I wrote a rom-com that was too like generic, publishing would find a way to be like, oh, well, we already have this book, even though, they don't, because it would not have been with the same types of people. So it was very much like, how can I take kind of this generic formula and like flip it on its head? And so with Meet Cute Diary, I feel like it was a lot of just kind of like making that story so meta, because Noah is this huge rom-com buff, and so he knows all of the beats and he's calling them out like as he expects them to happen, only for them to not actually go the way that he thinks they will, because he's also super naive. But I think that was kind of like I think it was just really rewarding to be able to like go through all of these beats that are so familiar, but then also at the same time, like kind of turn them on their head and kind of like have that like commentary on like, oh, like this is how it works, this is how it goes, but also we can make it a little bit different. But I will say, I think one of the hardest parts has been in terms of just like marketing and promoting the book, because I think people, there's kind of this like divide between people's like expectations and reality and like what actually ends up coming out of the book. So there's like people who I feel kind of aren't expecting the story to either like follow the tropes or defy the tropes, and like it kind of does both. So it's always kind of like, how do I explain to people what to expect in the story without literally having to like spoil everything that comes up? So yeah, I think it's definitely like a mixed bag, but I think it is really rewarding just to know that like at the end of the day, you're putting out something that will be in conversation with everything else that exists while also, doing its own thing.
Yeah, I think it's really cool, like how you did that with Meet Cute Diary, because I feel like when you read it, you can definitely see like the meta elements, and you can definitely see like where it kind of fits into the like wider romance conversation. So I think it's great.
Thank you.
Kat?
Sure. I mean, one thing I really like is taking all of the tropes and the character dynamics and the beats and the situations that we all know from a lifetime of consuming romantic narratives, and just like filling them up with the people who you don't usually get to see in those narratives. So, like, okay, so you want a rake and a wallflower. Okay, like great, they're both queer, and one of them is like chronically ill. And I love doing that because it feels like really powerful to give a happy ending to the people who have been shut out of that for until really recently, right? Because at a basic level, like the characteristic that defines the romance genre is the happy ending. And so when we say that certain people aren't worthy of a happy ending, that has a big impact, and being able to reverse that also is really powerful. And I really love that and find that satisfying.
I think that's amazing. I love that about your book. Julie?
Yeah, everyone has already said really smart things. But I would also add that I hate to call it wish fulfillment, but there is something really empowering about taking like all of the things I came to know and love about rom-coms and romance books growing up, and being able to plug in like fat queer people. Because I just remember reading and watching all of those things and thinking, great for them, but never for me. And then I started to fall in love with people. I started to kiss people. I started to meet people and kind of like step out of my own self-loathing shell. And that's really when I realized like, it's not me that was broken. It was the narratives that we've been perpetuating for so long. So I could talk about like the craft of writing tropes and all these different things, but for me, like I still get like that giddy, like empowered feeling of like, oh, like she's fat or he's fat or they're fat, and the love interest thinks that's hot and not something to overcome. And so I think that, I don't know, I guess it doesn't speak directly to queerness, but it inadvertently does in many ways, I guess. But I don't know that there's a challenge to it or something to overcome, other than kind of what Emery was speaking to, in that we've all been trained to know and expect certain things from books. And so it's really about getting readers to give these books a chance and understand that it's not the same recycled trope, because we are really experiencing literature in a new and profound way. So
yeah, and I think that's amazing. And I agree with you, like not even inadvertently that has to do with queerness. I think it definitely has to do with queerness, just because like I'm pretty sure like reading Pumpkin, it was like probably the first time like I read like a fat queer main character, and that was amazing for me to see, so definitely has a lot to do with queerness. Casey?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that Kat and Emery said about tropes and reclaiming tropes and elevating tropes through showing those tropes with a lens of a marginalized voice are all incredible things. And I loved what Julie said about just letting fat and queer people have fun. And I think that is something that is also really valuable in addition to, you know, reclamation and reinvention, is just allowing space for fun and pleasure. And the way I love about romance is it is just like one of the funnest spaces in literature. And it is a place where, you know, people get to just have a happy ending and do silly, messy stuff. And I think there is something kind of really quietly revolutionary about that when you put marginalized queer and trans people at the center of it. It's really cool how fun and love and all of those things can feel radical that way. And I think one of the challenges about it in the industry is convincing straight people to get on board with that. Like, it's like, I think that cis and straight people often are like, want to come at queer stories from an angle of how can they better themselves or educate themselves from consuming it, and to get them to be like, nah, come with us on this journey and we're going to have a good time and you're just going to kind of like hang out, you know, I think is a really, really cool thing about romance and about getting to do it from a queer and trans perspective.
Yeah, I basically echo like everything that everybody has said. And especially for me, I used to love romance when I was younger, when I was like a teenager, and I used to watch like all these romance movies like 10 Things I Hate About You, and also like read a lot of like Mechabot books, and obviously it's all like white, straight, cis people, and so when I started writing my romances, I just wanted to take all these romances that I could never be a part of and make them things that I could be a part of. So one of the things that was for me super rewarding when writing Honey and Issue was sapphic scenes in the rain, because that's something that I had never seen and I just always wanted to write. And it's really, really cool to see like readers connect with that as well. And for people to be like, oh, there's so much rain in this book. And like, there's like these queer brown girls and they're like hang out in the rain and kissing in the rain. And I'm like, yep, I did that deliberately. So that's been super fun. So obviously now we have like a lot of queer literature that we didn't, just even a few years back. But at the same time, I feel like there are a lot of expectations of what queerness and queer romance should look like. But there's so much diversity across all of your books in how these characters define their queerness and also how that intersects with other aspects of their identity. So how did you approach writing these characters and writing their worlds? So Kat, would you mind going first?
Sure. Well, most of my characters have either a physical disability or a chronic illness or some kind of mental health issues that impact their lives. So I want to make sure, first of all, that they have a happy ending that does not involve them getting better. Okay. Like, because I feel like that when I was first coming to terms with like my stuff, all of the narratives I saw were narratives where people, maybe like you go to a psychologist and then you're better, right? Or like maybe like you discover some experimental treatment and now you can walk up the stairs, or like I wanted to make sure that if I have a character who's agoraphobic, they're ending the book agoraphobic, okay? And if I have maybe they know that if they can go out and they're not gonna like die, but they still have that. They still have that as part of who they are. And if I have a character who's depressed at the beginning, like they're depressed at the end, they're just like depressed and in love. Okay. And I want to show that you can have these issues that like basically everybody has or will have, something like that this is compatible with like the happy ending that we consider the reward, in so many narratives. So I want to make sure that that's what my characters get.
I think that's amazing. Julie?
I love what Kat said so much. It so much echoes everything I strive to do, especially because growing up, it was every fat narrative I read showed a fat character losing weight and finding like moral value in that, or becoming a better person, or becoming worthy of love. And I hate this idea that you have to lose weight to become this higher like, you know, an enlightened version of yourself, because it's not true, because you might never become that person. In fact, you likely won't. So you might as well just live in the body that you have and live the life that you want to live in the body that you have. And, you know, I want my stories to always reflect that. But also, I hate the idea that you have to love yourself in order to be loved. It's one of, I think, the biggest false narratives that body positivity and, well, sometimes fat positivity tend to like push out, because it's not true. So often, so many of us find our value through seeing ourselves through someone else's eyes, or sometimes we don't always see our value. Sometimes it's not a linear journey. Sometimes it's full of ups and downs. And so I mean, without talking in circles and repeating the same things that Kat said, like I agree immensely.
Emery?
Yeah, I feel like I like half forgot the question because I was like so caught up in what you guys were saying. But yeah, I feel like for me, a lot of what it comes down to when I start trying to write is like a combination of like the things that I've seen and like the things that like I feel are my truth. Because like kind of like you were saying earlier, Adiba, like I do feel like you know, a lot of times, like when I was younger, I would watch or read like this media where like I would be like, oh, like that's perfect and I love that, but also that's not me. Like I physically can't be a part of this story. It's not welcoming to me. And so like I think also just kind of like I mean what Kat said and what Casey said, just like I think it ultimately comes down to like keeping in mind that like distance between like what I feel like is my truth and what I need to see on the page and what I feel like I never got a chance to see on the page. But then also keeping in mind the fact that there are expectations that straight readers and white readers and like cis readers will have as to what my story is supposed to pertain to and like how it like pertains to them. And so I think with all of my books, it just kind of comes down to like, how can I present my truth, my reality, like the things that I feel like I haven't had a chance to see, but like in a way that I can still kind of bring people who aren't part of that identity on for the ride, and they can kind of like I don't ever want to be that book that I don't ever want to be that author who has to like fully educate people with every book that I write, but I do feel like I want, you know, straight and white and cis people to like pick up my book and be like, oh look, this is fun, like this is cool, this is exciting, like it's almost like queer, trans, people of color can do that, and like they can have happy endings, and they can, you know, do whatever the hell we want to do because we're people. And so I think it's very much just kind of showing my desired reality, I guess, to an extent, but also just, you know, the truths that I have come to know about us and how we have our happiness and how we enjoy like the world in ways that a lot of people, including people who aren't even of our communities, could never even fathom were possible for us.
I love that. Casey?
Oh my God. Everybody said such amazing things. I feel silly even adding on to it, but I mean, I think that for me, when I do a lot of ensemble work, like I do pretty big casts in my books, and I kind of have this general rule where like, if somebody does not like have to be straight or cis by circumstance or like statistical likelihood, they just won't be. And I think that like, that also goes in hand with deciding that like, you know, I want every character who is queer or trans to very much embody that, but at the same time, that's not their only defining character trait. And that they all feel like the central character in their own story, even if that story is happening off page, if they're like a supporting cast member, I still want them to feel like they are self-motivated and they're following, you know, whatever their own purpose in life is. And so like when I'm building out characters, which I believe is what the question was, I don't know, I was again so caught up in these great answers. I'm like, I think that's what the question was. Me and Emery are on the same page on that one. But yeah, I think that I just really, I think that I want these casts to feel as rich and robust as the cast of any rom-com that you've ever loved, any, you know, 10 Things I Hate About You that you've ever loved. And also have that really, really rich layer of it also being a very singularly, specifically queer and or trans point of view for each character, and wanting that to not get lost in the page without also being the only thing that's going on in that character. Yeah.
I think you achieved that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and again, I would just echo basically what everybody said, because everybody had amazing answers. But especially I would echo what Emery said, because for me, when I write my books, I do like 2 passes. So my first draft is basically like me being completely authentic. I will sometimes write like entire like dialogues completely in Bengali, just because it helps me get the rhythm of what my characters are saying. So that's just like the draft that's completely me. And then I'll go back and I'll do like a pass to be like, well, will people who are like not Bengali, not queer, not living in Ireland, et cetera, will they actually understand it from context? So then I'd have to like kind of chip away at it a little bit. But then, you know, it's also about finding that balance of it being, still being authentic, but still having that context so everybody can kind of relate to it. So yeah. So something I loved about all of your books is that all of your main characters find support in family and friends. And I think this is especially important for queer characters and for queer readers, because, you know, so much of the time in real life, queer people may not find that support or may have difficulty finding that support. So how did you build these support systems for your main characters? Judy, would you mind going first?
Sure. One of my favorite things to write is family dynamics, especially because when I'm building a character, I really unlock so much about them when I can understand their family situation, especially like the parental or guardian figures in their lives. We don't realize how much we are. I hesitate to say like little mini versions of them, but really like how much of ourselves has been, you know, based off of what we've learned from them. And so it was really important to me for especially my queer characters to have like complicated home lives, but to always have supportive home lives, because I think of all of the big moments in my life and how I always refer back to things I've watched or things I've read as sort of like these cultural touchstones and these sort of like almost rehearsals in my head for how I might deal with those exact same situations. And so I think when we are showing supportive families with, you know, our queer characters, we really are having this opportunity to display like how, especially writing YA, how readers and how the people around them can sort of mimic that in their own lives and sort of be the support system, or like how they might be able to structure their own support systems. But yeah, as far as how I do it, I think it comes natural to me. Like I come from a big family who, like, you know, we hate each other, we love each other, and it's really exciting for me to write. It's one of my favorite things to dive into.
Katie?
I mean, I feel like we always talk about romance as a wish fulfillment genre. And I think that like a romantic happy ending is not the only wish that can be fulfilled there. You know, I think for a lot of readers, when they go into a romance novel, they kind of want to like dip into the warm waters of of an easier or somehow with a guarantee of a happy ending type of world. And to me, and this is not necessarily, I think, needs to be a rule across the board, but it's just a rule for me in my books. I tend to prefer to have my POV characters have a supportive home life, just because that's just a block I like to build from when I'm writing my queer characters, and I want that to be something that, I mean, in a selfish way, it was wish fulfillment for me, you know, and I really wanted that to be something that all of my characters could depend on, because I wanted to be something my readers could depend on. I wanted them to feel like they could come into my books and trust that the POV character would at least have, you know, supportive parent or supportive sibling or somebody who was affirming to them, in case they were somebody who was looking for that, you know, and if that was part of the wish fulfillment they were seeking in a romance novel. And I also, exactly what Julie said, I think family is also really complicated and messy and fun and weird and funny. And that is no different for queer people, just because there is also often another layer of like I didn't want that to be lost, you know, like we very much experience family in the same way as anyone else does, plus some other stuff. And so I wanted that to be in there, and I wanted that to feel really real, really honest, really grounded. So yeah.
Emery?
I love what Casey said about wish fulfillment, because I feel like that is something that people kind of overlook, is that like when you do wish fulfillment in romance, like it's not strictly about the love story. Like there are so many things. And I think that's literally how I approached the story too, was it was just very like, this was supposed to be a trans wish fulfillment book. It was the idea of like, you know, can trans people have all these things that cis people have? Yes, like we deserve all of them. And so like, ultimately, like I normally actually don't write super supportive families. It's usually like there's maybe one relative who's like good and like the rest of the family is kind of crappy. But in this story, it was just really like, I really wanted Noah to have like all of those, you know, potentials for happiness. And so like, I wanted to give him that supportive family and those supportive friends. And I think like, yeah, like it's partially like what Julie said, where it's like, you know, you're laying out this framework that people can use as like an example for their own life. And like, I feel like to a certain extent, I wanted to make sure that people were seeing the story and we're seeing like, yeah, like as a trans person, you can have a happily ever after, like in romance, and you should also have a supportive family and friends. But it was also just kind of an escape for me to actually write a story that didn't really focus a lot on bigotry, that had parents who were like, oh, you're trans? Excellent. Like, let's keep going. Like, oh, brothers, like, oh, you're trans? Like, let me learn everything about transes. I'm your biggest ally. Like, just to actually be able to be like, okay, look, we're just going to make everyone in this family and like all of these friends so supportive and nice. And like, I feel like that was just really cathartic. And I think sometimes, especially when you're a marginalized author writing from your own experiences, you sometimes unearth a lot of trauma, a lot of like dark stuff. And then you end up in interviews where everyone's asking you about trauma and dark stuff, and it's just everywhere. So to be able to write a book that's just purely wish fulfillment is actually really good therapy.
Kat?
I would echo what everybody has said and just add that, I mean, found family is a big deal in queer communities in general. And so it's great to see that echoed in books, right? Like, because this is, I mean, if anything is a part of queer culture, like if we can say anything at all it's found family. And so one thing that I like to do is to be really explicit that these people who are my character's support network are their family. Like these are the people they can turn to when times are tough. These are the people who are going to boss them around when they need bossing around. Like these are people who are ride or die. They're constants in the character's life. And if they don't have that at the beginning of the book, then part of their like journey is making sure that they have that at the end.
I love that. I love all of your answers. And again, like I would basically echo all of them. So we do have a few questions from the audience. So if anybody is watching, please, go ahead and drop your questions and we would love to answer them. So this is our first question. It's from Emily. My question is for the group as a whole. How do you decide if an initial idea or premise you think up is one to develop and expand on and transform into a full novel?
I'll take it.
Okay, go ahead, Casey.
All right. I have an easy, I'm going to cheat a little bit because my answer is that I have ADHD. And so if my, if my brain does that little like boop into like hyperfixation mode on an idea, I'm like, the instincts have told me that this is correct. And so when it is the thing that I want to think about when I'm going to sleep at night, and it's the thing that pops into my mind when I wake up in the morning, and it's the thing that like won't let me go. Like when I was pitching One Last Stop, I pitched a couple other stories at the same time, and the other ones were like stories I enjoyed, but they were not the ones that like would keep me up for an hour when I was trying to go to sleep, and so I just knew, I was like, if I am obsessed with this at this point when it's just kind of like a little seed of an idea, then I can be obsessed with it for the next 6 months to a year it's going to take me to draft it, and I can make people obsessed with it too if I try really hard. and so that's kind of how I view it. But I also think that like once I have an idea, I will often pitch it to my friends, and I am very fortunate to have a network of a lot of like really cool queer and trans people who are a really good focus group for what will go over with my average reader, and I will often pitch it to them. So my best advice is to make friends with good taste.
I feel like
That is good advice.
I feel like my brain does the exact same thing with like the ideas thing, because I have like a list of like, I don't know, like 50 or something WIP ideas, and every time I get one, I'll write it down in that list. But I end up not writing most of them just because it ends up being whichever one actually like absorbs me, and that's like kind of like rare. So I think that ends up just kind of being like, you know, a combination of like that, and then same thing like Casey said too, like I have like a group of friends, I'll like be like, oh yeah, like I'm thinking about this idea, and if they're like super excited about it, then I'm like, that's the one. And if they're like, then it's like, yeah, we don't need that.
Yeah, I feel like my editor is a really good barometer of this, but also like it's this like sort of like like difficult feeling to describe, where it's like just like that, like I don't know, like a feeling like you just know like this is the one. Like if it actually makes me want to sit at my desk, which is really a lot what Casey said. Like if I can actually tear myself away from any other thing and it makes me want to write, then it's the one.
For me, I often don't realize until I'm about halfway through the first draft that I was wrong and this is not an idea that should be a book, and I'm bored. And so what I do, and I should not be admitting this, what I do is I just write a different book and then I give it to my editor and I'm like, look, surprise. You thought you were getting this, but
I'm so impressed that you can do that.
Only once did we actually have to change the title.
Yeah.
So but it worked out well.
I love that. That's like, it feels so chaotic, and I love chaos. And I love that. But no, for me, it's basically the same as, you know, everybody else's, especially like what Julie said. It's like just that feeling. You can't really describe it, but you just get a feeling, and then, you know, it's the idea. So our next question is from Sophie Fee Flowers. My question is for Casey. I was wondering if you are a big fan of Lost because of all the references in One Last Stop.
Okay, I'm going to answer this question and I'm going to turn a question back to the panel. Yes, Lost is a very, very formative influence on me and the way that I kind of very, very messily deal with science fiction elements in my book. In the way that Lost does it very messily. But I love Lost. But I would like to turn this back to the panel and ask you if you could like comp your brand or your work or like any one of your books to any TV show, what would it be?
Ooh.
My current WIP is what I call it the Untamed meets the anime Demon Slayer book. So that's
Ooh. I feel like I could tell from Meet Cute Diary. I was like, ooh, I feel like we've got an anime fan on our hands, and I'm excited about it.
So I can't speak for Honey and Issue, but I can speak for my upcoming rom-com because it's called Jonah Paul in Love, and it's all about baking. So I would compare it to basically any like baking show, like Great British Bake Off, Nailed It, like whichever one you want, any of them I can compare it to.
I think anything I ever write for the rest of my life will be like a comp for my Mad Fat Diary. And if you haven't watched it, get on it. It's so good.
I'm trying to think of a show that's like really low plot, just vibes. And like, I'm not getting there.
Like an ASMR channel.
Yeah. Oh no, that doesn't work. I'm trying. I'm really trying.
Honestly, like Bake Off vibes. Like that's kind of it. Where it's just like people like having good energy together, you know? Like I know I deal with heavy issues and all of that, but really it's just people like being happy and sometimes flustered around one another and falling in love, which they don't do often enough, but they could.
When I picture Kat's books, I picture like the most beautiful people you've ever seen in the best outfits you've ever imagined, doing something that is both soothing and makes you happy to watch. So I feel like they're making cakes.
Yeah. They're making cakes.
Yeah.
Bake Off seems pretty apt.
I have to take it back. Schitt's Creek. I feel like Schitt's Creek is Schitt's Creek meets My Mad Fat Diary. Is that a thing? Is there a market for that? I don't know.
So we have another question from the audience. My question is for everyone. Since you all love rom-coms, what are some of your favorites? Movie, books, or TV shows? Difficult question. I can go first, since everybody else needs a little bit of time to think, I think. So as I said, 10 Things I Hate About You are already mentioned. That has been very, very formative for me. Mechabot books, The Princess Diaries, the Mediator series, like basically anything that Mechabot wrote, I grew up on. To All the Boys I've Loved Before, I am obsessed with that. I feel like I've watched that movie like dozens of times already. What else? Also like Sandhya Menon books. One of the first times I saw like South Asian people in rom-coms, so that was like just amazing for me. Yeah, I think that's about it.
This is a deep cut because she hasn't released anything in a while. But as far as like YA romance, Jennifer Eccles, does anyone remember Jennifer Eccles? I loved those. I also am waiting for like the perfect reimagining of She's All That, like just one of the most iconic high school movies for me growing up.
I feel like for me, I will surprise no one to hear that I'm a sucker for British rom-coms sometimes. Love a Notting Hill, which is technically kind of American, but British. And I love, I love, it's Bend It Like Beckham is a rom-com if you squint. And that's like something that just sprang to my mind.
It's a rom-com. It's a rom-com.
I don't think you have to squint that hard. But that sprang to mind. I loved like 13 Going on 30 makes me cry every time I watch it. Mark Ruffalo really was doing his best in that movie. And I really love, I have to echo what Adiba said about Sandhya Menon. I mean, God, her YA is some of like the warm and fuzziest reading experiences I've had. I really love her work. So that's like some greatest hits off the top of my head. 10 Things I Hate About You always.
I think like Clueless is one of my top movies of all time. So I love that one. In books, I really love Christina Forrest. I feel like she like absolutely hits it out of the water. And What If It's Us by Adam Silvera and Becky Albatali. That was a big one for me. To All the Boys, love that. I'm like trying to think of like what counts as like a rom-com like in TV, and I like can't think of anything. Like I watched this show on Netflix. It's called like Game Boys, and it's about like these two guys in the Philippines who meet via like game streaming. And that one's kind of a rom-com-ish. That one's super cute. Yeah, I feel like I can't even think of like rom-coms in TV.
I have a book. Olivia Dade's Spoiler Alert is like one of the funniest things I've read in my life. Like, and it like I've read it like 4 times now. It's like really a problem. I shouldn't like, I know her and I shouldn't, she's gonna get a restraining order. But like this book is so funny. And like whenever I read it, my mood like quadruples. And because it's not just about like people falling in love, okay? They're also falling in love while one of them is taking place in a show that is not Game of Thrones, okay? But it might be. And they're both writing fanfic about it, okay? So like there are just like layers of this book being like the most perfect object. And I have an arc of her new book and it's just as good, okay? And they're funny, like you actually laugh, like you laugh with your mouth, okay? Like making sounds when you're reading them. Highly recommend.
It's rare that you find a book that makes you like laugh out loud. So when you find one, you have to like hold on to it. So our next question is from Wendy. What are your favorite romance tropes?
Enemies to lovers. That's mine.
I think my favorite, I mean, fake dating, you know? So,
yes.
like, HANI Nishu.
I'm personally a big fan of a forced proximity. If two people can get trapped in a small enclosed space together, or have to share a room overnight, or you know, oh, we both found a baby, you know, I think like anytime that two people are forced to spend time together really, really gets me.
All I can think of when someone says forced proximity is that old episode of Who's the Boss, where they like split the sheets and one of them wears like a sheet around the top, one of them wears a sheet on the bottom. I'm very old, but I love it.
I echo all of these, but also mutual pining. So when they both are into each other, but they think the other person isn't, and it's just pining, and I love that.
I like hurt comfort. Like I want to sick that scene. Like that's the good. That's good. I like it.
Oh yeah.
These are all amazing tropes. So this next one is from Ian. For the whole panel, I really like finding hidden jokes or nods to other things when I'm reading. What's a hidden or inside joke in your book that really made you laugh when you wrote it?
My whole book is an inside joke. I felt so bad. I felt so bad when like they were asking me for the audiobook. They were like, how do you pronounce some of these like blog handles? And I was like, listen, they're all shit post jokes. Please don't ask me how to pronounce that. But the one I talked about on Twitter was there's a blog that like comments on like Noah's blog, and the handle is Uwu Knife Daddy. And that's just a really, really awkward inside joke that I have with one of my friends that made its way into the book. I'm sorry.
Well, first, this question is actually from my spouse. So hi. Thanks, Ian. But I think my favorite, and also one that still freaks me out a little bit, is my dad had an awful boss a long time ago that I absolutely hated. And he was a person who also had local commercials. And I sort of modeled a character after him in my first Dumpling book. And I was like, well, this is fine. No one will know who he is. Turns out everyone who lives near me knows exactly who it is. So it's an inside joke with like me and everyone who lives within like a 30-mile radius. And then it was like, it's fine. They'll never put him into the movie because they have to make it, 90 minutes long. And then he was in the movie too. So sorry about that. Don't sue me.
Mine is in One Last Stop. One of the characters works at a bar called Slinky's. And it is it's almost exactly a replica of a bar that I used to love going to in college that has since closed. And I wanted it to be immortalized forever. In a book. And it's like the bar specifically had, its big thing was the entire ceiling was lined in underwear that patrons had brought in to hang from the ceiling, and like underwear and bras and things like that. And so I put that in the book. And so anybody who's actually been to Slinky's in my college town will immediately recognize it from the underwear on the ceiling.
I wrote a book that's like thinly veiled Captain America fanfic. And that's, so I don't know if that counts as an inside joke, but it exists. And I wrote it for like the handful of people who would see it for what it is and know the truth. And it brings
I have to know, which book is it?
Which one?
It's Two Rogues Make a Right.
Okay.
I don't think I really have any hidden or inside jokes in my books, but I do have some things that are like Bengali specific because it's like written in Bengali. So if you're a Bengali person, you will get it. Unfortunately, nobody here other than me is Bengali. So if I say, you guys won't understand it. So the next question is from Francis. As romance authors, how do you decide your heat level for each book and make sure that various levels of intimacy work within the specific scene and the story overall?
I feel like this is mostly one for me and Kat because we're the ones who are writing the most sex scenes, I think. I mean, for me, I think that it's always this fine line between I want it to I'm always like walking this line because I don't ever want it to come across like some types of sex are less fit to print, you know, while also bearing in mind like my own comfort level of explicitness, because also my mom reads my books sometimes. And so I very much like, I think my general rule with most sex scenes, I think I do with most adult romance, I do about the same level of heat, which is like a semi fade to black where we get into it and then we kind of switch into like a more emotional gear. And that is like really comfortable for me just in terms of like, I feel like I'm still accomplishing everything I want to accomplish by what that scene is accomplishing, while also kind of leaving some things to the imagination. But I completely love reading romance novels that leave nothing to the imagination. It just depends.
Which is where I come in. Okay. So some characters are going to be like more motivated by horniness than others. Okay. And so like, you've got to figure that out. Like if you're writing the kind of characters who are going to get down at 25%, then you can't really do fade to black. Okay. Like you can't sustain fade to black for 75% of a book. Okay. But if you have characters who are like more up in their heads, you can do some like gauzy details, and that might mean that like two different books in the same series have like radically different heat levels, and that might confuse some people, but I feel like everybody can sort of they can deal. Everybody can deal.
Yeah. I mean, I think that for YA, there's like a pretty firm line in the sand. There is some steamy YA out there if you look for it, but most of my YA sex scenes that I've written are pretty much fade to black. But I do have an adult romance coming out in August that is PG-13, mainly because it's written for Disney and it's a Cinderella retelling. So it's something that we wanted to very clearly be like a YA crossover for YA fans to have like a great access point for romance. So it's definitely fade to black, PG-13, with just a little bit of heat. But I do have another project coming out next year, and my goals for it were for it to be happy and horny. So it goes like as far as the heat level barometer will allow me to, which is really exciting.
I don't think I've ever written like an actual sex scene on page. Like I've done fade to black. I mean, I write 99% YA, and then like the last 1% is like an even split between middle grade and adult. So like obviously like, you know, in the YA middle grade sphere, you kind of have to keep it really you know, PG for the most part. But even with adult though, I think part of it kind of comes to like, I tend to write a lot of younger characters who are kind of still figuring out their sexuality and kind of like their approach to dating and what they're even interested in, and kind of so I feel like a lot of my books don't even have the characters really getting like to each other until close to the end, so I don't really have a whole lot of time to really explore that kind of stuff. But I feel like it just ultimately does come down to like the characters, and I think because my characters are always so like, I have no idea how to do anything yet, it never really gets to that point.
Yeah, I second everything that Emery said, because again, like writing YA, it is very much like PG, and I don't think I've written a sex scene in YA yet. We'll see what the future holds. So this is our last question, and I think it's a really good question to end on, actually. You all have talked about how much of your own personal experiences and desires have gone into these books. How does it feel to see them received with such support?
That's such a sweet question.
Yeah, it's a great question.
I think that, so when Dumplin' first came out in 2015, it was like the fat people literary lands were very barren. So I didn't have many expectations for my books being about fat people. But it was just this really like incredible show of support and reminder that like what I was feeling and pining for in my books and in my stories, I wasn't alone in wanting that. I think it's like really with writing my queer books though, it's been this really fantastic reminder and evidence that, like, I don't know, especially all my bi ladies out there in a in a relationship with a cishet guy, you know what I mean? Like, you know, the weird lonely do I fit here feelings. And so I think really releasing Ramona Blue and finding readers that connected with that book was just, it's still really incredible for me. Those letters and emails still, I don't want to say mean the most, but hit me in a place where not all of them do. So thanks a lot.
I mean, for me, I grew up for a long time in pretty conservative Christian part of the Deep South, a little below the Bible Belt. And being queer or being trans was not something that seems like it would ever make me thrive in the environment that I grew up in. And to enter into a space where it is something I get to share with a lot of people and have affirmed in return from a lot of people, and for it to be something that I can kind of, it feels very reciprocal between me and readers, where I feel like I give them something, they give me something, and we both feel better at the end of the day, you know? And that's a really, really, really incredibly cool feeling. And it kind of like, it does this sort of retroactive healing that I get to have sort of this fun and joyous and really youthful sort of party of queerness that I didn't get to experience growing up. And it's really, really cool to have that now as an adult. And it's really exciting. And I am really hopeful that, I mean, if I could make like one queer kid in a similar environment feel less alone and feel like, oh, this is actually a cool thing about me that I like about myself, then I'm happy. So
I think for me, it's actually like kind of funny because I think it was maybe like 5 months before my book even released, I did a panel and someone like asked, what was it like to see yourself in a book for the first time? And my answer was, I still haven't done that yet. Even to this day, like even my book is not fully me, but like just the concept of like a triracial main character, like I've never heard of that. I'd asked so many people for recommendations my entire life, and I could never find a single book that even had me like racially represented. And then you add being queer, being trans, like disability, like that kind of stuff. It's just so like, it was so ingrained in my head my entire life that like nobody wants what you're writing. Nobody wants your story. So to take the time to like write that story anyway, and then on top of that, to make it, you know, not so educational and just to make it what I wanted to read, and like, you know, all the steps of having people be like, well, you need to make this more educational. Why isn't there more information? Why aren't we learning more things? And like at each stage to be like, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to do that. And not know if that was going to backfire. Like if that was going to be like it, you know, my whole career is over because I refused to do this thing that people asked me to do. And so ultimately to have made all those decisions, knowing that that was what I wanted to do, but expecting it to work out really badly for me, and then to have it actually go really well, has been like probably the single most validating thing that has ever happened to me in my life. Like to just basically know that like, you know, you were right to like stand by your morals, to do what felt right for you. And like the other day, somebody emailed me asking if they could get a tattoo of something from my book that I had made for like the pre-order campaign. And I was just like, this book has been out for a month and a half. And like after all of that, to be told, like somebody wants part of my book like permanently on their body, like it meant that much to them. And I think that has been like the single most like overwhelming thing, just to be told like, no, like it's okay. Like you didn't have to compromise. You don't have to compromise. Like you don't have to change who you are to like be successful in publishing. That's wild to me. Like I'm still processing that. I haven't gotten there yet.
For me, it's just like, I love hearing that people want queer, happy stories, okay? That they want to like fill their lives and their brains, and they're going to use their time reading about queer, happy stories. And like, that there's a hunger for this. And I that's validating for me.
Um, for me, it's basically the same as Emery, honestly, because I never really saw myself represented in anything. The first YA with a Bangladeshi protagonist was published in 2019. And the second was my debut. So, I had literally just never seen characters like me anywhere. And so I still remember the day that my debut released, and the amount of people, the amount of Bengali people who were like quote tweeting my tweet and saying like, I have never, I've never seen a book with Bengali characters before. Like I've just never seen it. And this book has queer representation, and it has like a Brazilian character. And there were just so many people who were literally just saying, I've never seen this before. And that was me until I wrote my own book. So yeah, it means so much to, be the person who I guess is being like one of the first to be able to publish that, and hopefully like Bengali people are seeing that representation for the first time, second time, but obviously all of us, whatever our marginalizations, we all deserve to see ourselves represented. So I'm really glad that all of our books are here, and so many queer kids with like who identify with so many different identities are definitely seeing themselves represented just because of everybody's books here. So thank you so much for writing your books, for this panel. It was amazing to speak with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you all so much. This was so much fun.
Thank you. This was so
Thank you
great.
for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good night.